right, welcome everyone back to another episode of Krish Marketing, powered by Kind Lending. Today we have an incredible guest, Mr. Nate Fain, our branch manager based out of Pensacola, Florida, who joined our company just maybe a couple of weeks ago. Is that right, Nate?
A couple, 3 weeks ago.
All right, so this introduction, hopefully I don't chop it up here, but Nate has helped thousands of home buyers throughout his career and reached millions. And when I say millions, we'll dig deep into that. Nate has decided in 2018 to start making video content to teach others about real estate and mortgages so that others could learn about him on a larger scale. Today I follow Nate, and I imagine a lot of you that are listening and watching today follow Nate as well. And he has millions of followers across social media platforms and continues to grow it. And I'm going to kick off right off the bat, Nate, is, our conversation here just in the last week or two. You said a very interesting vernacular that I've just kind of been using all week since we had that conversation. And it's like the connections have been made. So storytelling, right? Storytelling. You said storytelling to me the other day, and I'm like, that's what it is. Education material,
right?
It's not me just telling you about what you already know or what we think you want to know. It's storytelling. It's tell us about, what do you mean by storytelling in social media today?
Well, and you are obviously the marketing guru, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, or wait until after the podcast to correct me if I'm wrong. But in my opinion, your success in marketing comes down to your ability to empathize with your target audience, to your target customer, consumer, whatever. Your ability to think like them and connect with them, and then also cater your messaging to them. Ultimately, that's what defines your success in marketing. So I think the difference between just straight up creating educational content or entertaining content or whatever, if you can tell a story and also educate and also entertain, the art of storytelling, you have to have empathy in that as well. So you're combining all these really powerful things and all these really powerful marketing concepts into one, and you're making it super relatable back to your consumer, back to your audience, back to your target, whoever that you're trying to target. So it's storytelling. It's a way to, it's powerful because it creates that connection. When you're listening to a story from someone, like there's a connection there. You can visualize the story happening. You can visualize yourself even in that story. So if you can combine all that together, it really helps the consumer or whoever you're targeting put themselves in that situation and apply it to their life, so that anything that you're saying in the piece of content, it becomes more powerful and more relatable.
That's awesome. I've heard a lot of truths in the way we kind of create content today in social media, right? And one of our last guests was a gentleman named Stephen Cooley, who's the CEO and founder of Art versus Math. And he says something. He said, he was talking about, what, Gen Zers, they all want, to be told, to be empathized with, and truly meet them where they're at, right? And I made the comment, hey, you know what? Also millennials. Well, let's look at social media as a whole today. It's multi-generational, right? Baby boomers all the way down to Gen Z. My son has asked me for social media, or more what it is, and now he wants kind of in on it. And no,
right? Yeah, not yet.
But so, we went through all those personas, and we figured out all these things. My buzzword, right? Yours is storytelling. Mine is authenticity, and they both need the need. Everyone wants to be spoken to like a friend. Everyone wants to be spoken to, and not marketed to when they don't want to be marketed to.
Right.
And that's the genius of all these algorithms that exist today across all these networks. Even LinkedIn isn't on it now, right? To really be able to target based on need, then the social listening. Nate, I read an article yesterday about who was it that was doing listening on devices, and we know it exists. It's like we always thought it was just during the CIA and after 9/11 and all those things. But I mean, it's real.
Mm-hmm.
That movie, Batman, one of the Batman movies. You remember that?
Yeah.
When
it's got the radar or whatever it is. Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
like, I can't stand by this, but
Right.
dude, like everyone is doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to someone today about social listening.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so there's a lot to uncover there. Maybe we'll have you back on to talk about social listening.
Okay.
But back to storytelling, Nate. And I'm all over the place. I haven't been diagnosed with anything yet, but
not yet.
Apparently I can't stay on one topic most days. But Nate, you had this TikTok, and we're gonna include it on the link of this podcast, right? And you've had a lot of TikToks, so you're probably like, which one is he referring?
Yeah, which one is it? Hold on.
You told a little story, and it's just such a genuine kind of piece that you did. 30 seconds, if that. And you were talking about a married couple, right? And do you know which one I'm talking about?
Is it the one where they were questioning whether they should have bought a house?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you run us through that? We'll play it on the episode as well. But
so I'll since this is like behind the scenes, this is a little bit how the sausage is made. So truth be told, that was a combination of two stories, but it was the same concept between the two stories. It was two people. One was a married couple, one was not, and they were hesitating about. And it was almost like they told me that they had bought a house, and then there was like, I could feel a little bit of like guilt almost out of in their voice, or like they immediately started justifying why they'd bought a house right then, which was funny to me, because one of them didn't know what I did for a living, and the other person did. Right. But it was funny to me, like, you don't have to explain yourself to me. Like, I still believe in the power of homeownership, no matter what the rate is right now. Like, you made a good decision. But the story they were trying to justify why they bought a house. And it became evident that a lot of people in their life, they had told them that it was a bad idea, or they had read on the news or heard on wherever that it was a bad idea. And the lesson to that story was that it really comes down to your personal situation, and to not listen to all the noise. For sure, take some feedback. Try to learn some lessons from the people that know what they're talking about. Sure. But if I'm going to buy a house and you're going to buy a house, we're going to have different needs. We're going to have different things that prevent us from buying a house too. So it might be a good time for you to buy in your area, whereas it might not be a good time for me specifically to buy in my area. So I think that story was powerful and resonated with a lot of people, because there's a lot of people that feel like they should not buy right now, or they've had a lot of people in their lives tell them that it's not a good time to buy. And it's confusing, especially for like first-time home buyers. They don't know what to do. And the moral of that story, the lesson of that story, what I was trying to convey is, like, personal finance is personal. This decision is personal. Because even when rates were low, some people should not have bought then because of their situation. Like, we think back to, say, the spring of 2021, rates were still low, but everything was in a bidding war. So let's say that you were someone that was strapped for cash and didn't have a lot of money to go over ask. Technically, that wasn't a great time for you to buy a house, because you are overextending yourself by draining all of your savings. Exactly. Versus now, where you might be able to buy a little bit less of a house, but you're not draining your entire savings account. So yes, the rate's higher now versus what it was back then. But for that person's situation, it was more impactful to buy right now, and better idea to buy right now, because they're not having to pay over ask. They're not having to liquidate as much money. They're not having to drain their savings account. So personal finance is personal, but by telling that story, I've gotten a lot of great feedback from that particular piece of content in general. And I think it was because it was very relatable. It was a very common story as well. But it also, one of my goals of that video was also to redirect and try to rewire some people's thinking of, okay, I hear all the noise from social media, from the news, from Uncle Wayne, who's never originated a mortgage, from, my Aunt Betsy, who's never sold a home. I hear all this noise, but like, really it comes down to surrounding yourself with professionals that want what's best for you, that have a fiduciary responsibility to do what's best for you, and then listening to their guidance and doing what's best for you and your family.
That's awesome. I love analogies, Nate.
Hmm.
And it's like I wouldn't go to my barber for legal advice.
Yep.
I wouldn't go to my vet for mechanical car advice. So it's those things. And we are faced as mortgage and real estate professionals today with combating the narrative that exists
Hmm.
through mainstream media. And here's an opportunity through whatever videos social tool that you might be utilizing, TikTok, Instagram. I mean, every YouTube has shorts now, which is
Hmm.
like stories. LinkedIn tried it, I think, for a short while.
Okay.
It died.
I missed
uh,
that boat.
yeah, it was on for like maybe 2 months tops,
Okay.
and they had the ability to have stories,
Okay.
but they realized that they're not in that business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but you can still create video content as well, and
Hmm.
place it in Pinterest, undiscovered gem for most.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's an opportunity for you to navigate through the hodgepodge mess
Hmm.
of narrative that exists and put your spin on it, because you are either a financial representative of mortgage or a real estate professional that's listening
Hmm.
to the show. And you have to have your ability to put that, combat that narrative. And
Hmm.
so you've done that in 30, 45 seconds, however long that video was. And you've got a ton of those.
Hmm.
And I think I looked at that, I listened to it, and then you and I had that conversation about storytelling earlier this week. And I'm like, man, this guy, Nate, and we have a couple of loan officers at our company now that have that caliber of understanding. Is like, okay, you know what? If I break it down,
Hmm.
right, it meets the need for multi-generation, which is
Hmm.
important.
Hmm.
Because, what if the parent that told their child it was a bad time to purchase a home heard that, they're like, oh wait, you know what, you're right,
He's
because
making some
it's
good
been
points.
25 years since I bought a house,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Exactly.
Or your colleague at work that is renting, has no desire to purchase, and
Hmm.
they may be 2 or 3 years out,
Hmm.
giving you advice like, well, that's not what I heard on
Right.
CNBC or whatever it was that they listened to.
And
So
what I've found is like sometimes people project their own financial situation on you
mhm.
too.
Oh yeah.
So I've found that too. So that's another way that part of why I'm so passionate about creating content for mortgages or whatever it is, whatever kind of content I do create out there, who knows? But is because I think financial literacy is so important,
Mhm.
and one of the biggest things that we miss as a society is that personal finance is personal. It's that simple,
Mhm.
and really understanding how my needs are different than someone else's. So
Exactly.
um, if I can tell a story like that and someone can relate to, like, I've been in that exact same situation, or I've been in a very similar situation, and they can learn from that,
Yeah.
that for me is the biggest power of storytelling. But it all, for me, like one of the reasons that I started creating video in general was I actually have a degree in education that I don't use. I wanted to educate people on how to buy a home. So financial literacy, again, like so important to me. This was one way that I could do it. I've
Mhm.
also got a degree in journalism. So it's like I'm bringing these two things together, and you combine it with my banking/finance experience, and it's just like this one big content baby, right?
Mhm.
So, but at the heart of that is like I want to teach people so that they have that same financial literacy that I have. I've
Yeah, sure.
had the blessing of being able to grow up in the finance industry. I've had several jobs that I've learned a lot about finance, and not everybody has that same opportunity. So that was another reason for me wanting to start that.
Yeah, I mean, education, going to the root of education, I think the only thing I learned pre-college, even probably
Hmm.
in college, was how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah, we wrote like checks or whatever, right?
And we played the stock market, right?
Uh
I
huh.
think in
Yeah.
my class, like I had took econ in high school, and I remember like not really learning anything about anything.
Hmm.
And my first job in like before I graduated college was as a CSR at a bank.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had this young lady, she was 90 something years old. She came into the bank, and unfortunately she had bounced a bunch of checks.
Uh huh.
She was negative in her account. She had hundreds of thousands of dollars and other accounts,
Uh
CDs
huh.
and savings accounts and all this stuff, right? And she was like, son, I just don't understand like how I am negative. I'm like, well, you don't have any money in your checking account. And you wrote
Yeah.
all these checks. You know, this is like $20 at the grocery store. This is like 90s, right? Late
Yeah.
90s. And she said, well, I have all of these checks and I just couldn't put two and two together. She goes, she goes, turns out she didn't replenish her checking account until the checks were all written in the book. And that was her mentality.
That was her sign to
And
put money
and
back
for
in
like
it.
90 years old, you've been banking for your
Yeah.
life, right? And you just didn't realize it just never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the basic, like, checks and balances of basic accounting. And folks didn't get that. Now today,
No.
I got to give it to the younger generation. They
Yeah.
do understand more because they see more,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, there's a
Obviously,
lot more information out there, which I think is great. And so I think the creator and again the pseudo journalist or whatever
sure,
you want to call it
sure,
in me, I feel the need to get my knowledge out to the public.
yeah,
I like sharing that.
hmm,
So I think that's another reason why I started that, but also why I would encourage other mortgage or real estate professionals to do the same. And one of the, I've taught social media classes before, and a lot of the pushback that I get is I don't know what to talk about.
yeah,
And I always tell them, start with a lot of the FAQs that you get.
mhm,
What are the frequently asked questions? Like you're probably going to get 4 or 5 today. Like if your
yeah,
phone's ringing and you've got customers on the hook talking about whatever, or prospects, like take inventory of that conversation, because if those people are asking you questions, other people have that same exact question, even some of those most basic stuff. So
mhm,
um, one of the traps that a lot of industry professionals fall into is they create content for other industry professionals instead of
mhm,
having the consumer in mind. So one of the things is like, well, why don't you talk about what EMD is, or how to calculate DTI? And some of the pushback I've gotten from other LOs is like, well, everybody knows how to do that. Like, no,
sure,
not everybody knows how to do that. Everybody in our industry should know how to do that. So are you creating videos for other loan officers to like give you props? Or are you creating videos for realtor partners to learn about mortgages, for possible consumers to learn about mortgages? So when you're creating, make sure that you're creating for the consumer, for the client. Like, don't create with the little voice in the back of your head saying like, well, my competition or my other loan officers are going to think this is stupid. Like, you're not creating for them. You're creating for the
yeah.
consumers and for your referral partners.
I'm gonna throw in an interesting wrench, right? So going back to audiences, going back to
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z, and of course this wasn't on your prep sheet,
Okay.
so keep it interesting, right? I had a conversation here recently, dissecting audiences.
Mm-hmm.
The Gen Zers who are like in their early to mid 20s, graduated college, some of which, I bought my first home at 21, right? Like people
Mm-hmm.
buy houses early on. These kids, young adults rather,
Mm-hmm.
um, have a lot of the audience in the Gen Z market have been scorned and scarred. And
Mm-hmm.
what we forget to think about is they were young, maybe 6, 10, whatever years old when the market crashed. And
Mm-hmm.
there was no filter back then, right?
Right.
So essentially, if they had parents or family members in their home that lost jobs or they lost their own homes, your record foreclosures back then. A lot of them are coming out of college or in the workforce, out of high school or whatever, and have this notion
Mm-hmm.
about it's unattainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coupled with, again, the media piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's such an interesting piece because you're having to build authenticity, but trust.
Mm-hmm.
That trust, if they don't trust you, and one thing I know in my personal life, I do some interviewing of social media influencers, and we just met one, and the loyalty and the following of social
Mm-hmm.
media influencers is unless you're Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
and you have that following, which is,
Mm-hmm.
Shelby's listening on the back end, she's a Swiftie. Um, we Social media influencers have people in the grasp of their
Mm-hmm.
hands to get them kind of like, not puppet masters, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
terrible way of looking at
Yeah.
it, but they trust you that you've done the research. And again, you're filtering the education back to them. Celebrities don't have that type of reach today.
Right.
Social media influencers, or just like you and I, are random people that have decided to take this on. So kudos to you for taking this on as a responsibility.
Well, I think I think it's powerful because of the fact that a lot of these influencers and a lot of these creators, they do it from a front-facing phone on their cell phone.
Yeah,
so like, how relatable is that, right? Not only that, but I think that builds a little bit more. It's almost like you get a sneak peek in behind their lives versus like this heavily curated whatever, where you're like on some set that there's 6 or 7 people that are messing with this, and it goes into post production. You've got all kinds of color grading and everything. Not that there's not value in like a high produced bit of content, but the influencers are able to do that because I think of going back to what you said, that authenticity, like you feel. And it was weird for me, like as my platform was growing, when people would come up and meet me like on the street or like at a ball game or something like that. And they come up and they say, "Hey, you're Nate. You're the dude that makes mortgage videos." And the first couple of times I'm like, this is weird, dog. And then it started happening more and more. But like, it's cool because they feel like they already know you.
Yep.
And in a way, they kind of do. Well. Yeah, exactly right. But if you let them in and you let them see that authentic side, then they kind of do, right? They know a little piece of you. So,
but that's what's relatable. That you're a normal, reachable person, right?
Yep.
Random fact: I read this the other day, and I don't know how true this is, but the number one type of social media influencer is a makeup influencer.
Really?
And the reason why is because they start off with nothing on their face, and they shows the blemishes and the imperfection, and then they're painting it whatever. I don't know how they do that.
That's
stuff.
cool.
I never asked my wife.
Yeah.
But that's because they're being vulnerable, right? And they're being authentic. And so I found that really interesting. It's like, okay, I would not have pegged that as number one type of social media influencing.
That's interesting.
Real quick, we're going to segue into, because our audience is like, okay, no, we're jazzed up. This guy Nate knows what he's talking about.
Okay.
Whether you've got 200 followers on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, or starting out fresh, or you've got 500 or 5,000 trying to get to 1 million. What are a couple of steps that someone ought to do in the real estate and mortgage industry that wants to follow suit? Aside from like, okay, you create content, your calendar and all that stuff, but like, what's next for them? Like, where do they start?
Part of it is, and this is something that a lot of gurus will say, is consistency. So I tell the story that specifically, a lot of people know me specifically for TikTok, but I've been creating videos for about 2 years prior to TikTok, even me signing up for TikTok. But even when I signed up for TikTok, and I posted my first 3 videos, whatever it was, and I think my arrival on TikTok, this is the story of that. So I posted a video and I got like 10,000 views. Like within like a couple hours, I'm like, wow, that's a lot more views than I've ever had on any other platform that quickly. And then it kind of stalled. Went to sleep and I woke up and it had 1 million views. Wow. I woke up to 20-something thousand followers. So it was just like all of a sudden I had this huge platform that I had never had before. But I didn't know what to do with it, right? But I kept consistent. I knew that there was an opportunity there. I knew that there were people watching. I knew that there were people listening. So I was like, I don't know what to do with this, but I'm just going to keep posting and see what happens. That was in February of 2020. I didn't get my first deal, even with 20-something thousand followers, until June of 2020 from that. And the lesson there is the consistency, right? So, and part of it was even with 20,000 followers, I wasn't afraid to tinker and experiment. Like it was like, I wonder if this will work. I wonder if this will work. And then you eventually find some stuff that works for you. Then you double down on it. You're like, okay, no, this works really well for me. And this creates, it's not just about followers, it's not just about views. This creates the conversations. This creates the kind of engagement that I want.
Right.
And then I'm going to double down on that. And then Eventually, I started getting deals from it. But when I tell that story, most people are like, wow, you had 20 something thousand followers and you still posted for 4 months without a trace of a deal. And sometimes that's what it takes. Now, even if you're starting out, like I tell people to put your head down and post consistently for 6 months. I don't know what the cadence is going to be for you. I don't know what's comfortable for you. For you, it could be once a month. It could be once a week, but however many times that you can post, like the more you can post, the quicker you can find out what you're good at and what your audience wants. So I'm not a huge believer in posting like 3 times a day or anything like they used to say. I did that for 6 months, but the more you post, and even if you're just filming videos and you end up not posting it, it's that practice in front of the camera. You're getting more comfortable in front of the camera. So it's having the courage to start and be bad at something, but then pushing through and having belief in yourself that it's going to work and you're going to get something from it. Right. And you're going to help people from it. So it's that consistency, but then also really asking yourself, like, who do I want watching this? Who do I want to learn from me? Like what kind of eyeballs do I want? Because I think one of the problems and and I've fallen into this trap too. It's like we become obsessed with the vanity matrix, the vanity matrices. And it's like, I just want views. I just want follows. I just want this. When in reality, like I want to attract my ideal client. I want to attract my ideal referral partner. So I try to put myself in their shoes. Like I said at the beginning, like I put myself in the shoes of my ideal audience, my ideal client. And I think to myself, like, what are they struggling with? Like, what do they need to know about? What do they maybe have some misconceptions about? And then I talk to that.
That's awesome. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes is such a valuable experience. I mean, we watched the movie. I'm going to digress here for a second. Have you watched the movie The Switch? Yeah. The Family Switch?
Yeah.
That came out. And my wife and I were laughing, but that's exactly what it's like. Until you live the day in someone else's shoes, whether they're struggling with finance or they're just, on the brink of attaining their dream of home ownership, you just don't know how it feels. It's been some years since I purchased a home. And things are going okay, but until you've lost your job, until you've done those things, so you have to. What a valuable lesson for anyone that's listening today on how to kind of start that next step and consistency. Love it.
Well, like if you, let's say for instance, like you love doing VA loans, or then you're not going to go out and start making content about investment properties. Like if you don't like working with investors, part of it is like you talking to the people that you want to work with too. This is why it's so powerful, is you get to control that narrative. You get to build your own audience, right? So instead of casting this massively wide net, and it's not about like niching down to the very smallest whatever. Like you still want to cast a medium-sized net, so to speak. But like while you're figuring out who you want to talk to, but if you already know, like, okay, I'm really good at new builds, or I'm really good at renovation loans or whatever, like start talking about that, because there's a big enough population out there, big enough base out there that like they're going to listen to that. So don't sit there and think like, okay, I have to cast this huge wide net of conventional, FHA, VA, and go through all the non-QM. Like if you like to do that and you and you have enough knowledge to do that, that's fine. But I have found that a lot more people, like, it's like a medium niche down. It's not all the way down, but it's like a medium niche down to where like you've got 2 or 3 different topics that you're really solid at talking about, and go from there.
That's awesome. So as you know, our CEO, Glenn Stearns, is a very out of the box thinker. Right. And I love that about him. I think, I don't think he's ever met anyone that he hasn't said something about thinking outside the box, right, in his own way. And so we like to do that, right? We're really out there. We're just like, someone said to me the other day, I think Shelby, that's on the backside of this podcast recording, she heard it and she's like, someone said, you know what, like, kind of a little cheesy. I'm like, that hurt my heart, right? But maybe it's not cheesy. It's just a different way of putting our marketing out there and our messaging. But you, for one, When I heard this story, and I think you have a TikTok or a video about it, but when I heard this story, I just chuckled uh,
Hmm.
in the kindest way. I go back and tell all the marketing stuff that I think everyone else should find interesting to
Hmm.
my wife, and she found it very funny. Your Craigslist story.
Hmm.
Your Craigslist story was just like top notch, and
Yeah.
to give you a little color, before mortgage, I was in real estate marketing.
Okay.
And I worked for a broker who, I mean, we had hired like personal assistants out in the Philippines. We had this whole Craigslist process. And this,
Okay.
granted, this was right before the crash, after the crash, I can't remember. I think it was right after the crash. And we were looking for foreclosure, short sales, and a lot of
Hmm.
different things. And we used Craigslist religiously back then,
Yeah.
religiously, and people laugh. It's like now it's like, Craigslist has its own documentaries about murders and stuff,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
tell us about your Craigslist story.
So this was in 2014. I got in the mortgage industry in 2012, and rates were like I think they were in the high threes, low fours at that point. And at some point in 2013, I think they were in the threes, and then rates went up a little bit.
Mhm.
And back then, I was only doing refinances. I cut my teeth in the mortgage industry doing refinances. But when rates went up, a lot of the refinances dried up. So I was like, well, I gotta do the thing and go get some purchase deals.
Mhm.
But I was living in Pensacola, Florida, where I live now. That's not where I grew up. I didn't have much of a network here. I didn't have a realtor base. I didn't have any of that. So I was like, how am I going to do this? Because I'm broke. I need money now. I
Mhm.
need some closings now. And I was like, how can I get in front of home buyers? Because for me to go get deals from a builder or from a CPA or a realtor or whatever, that takes time because it
Mhm.
takes time to build a relationship. It takes time to build that trust. Like if I walked up to a realtor, I was like, "Hey, I'm a loan officer. I'd love to do business with you." If I get business from them like that day, I'm like, "Whoa, like that was not that good of a pitch. Like what is the deal here? Like you can't expect that." So while I was building all these relationships on the back end and building up my network on the back end, my idea of going and getting some quick money was to leverage Craigslist and reach out to people that were selling their homes on
Mhm.
Craigslist.
Mhm.
I started on Zillow, and for whatever reason, like I would search first-time home buyers for sale by owners on Zillow, and for whatever reason, I could never get a call back from the
Mhm.
people that were advertising their house on Zillow. So I, for whatever reason, looked at Craigslist and I figured out a way to where I could quickly like copy and paste emails and just
Mhm.
blast out, 7, 8, 9, 10 emails every single morning.
Mhm.
And finally, like it started to work. And my pitch was simple. I was like, I'm not trying to help you sell your house. I'm not trying to charge you to come sell your house. Like all I want to do is put my sign in your yard. I will handle the yard sign calls so that I can pre-screen anybody that may want to buy your house. Like the last thing you want is someone coming down the road, seeing a for sale sign and thinking like, okay, maybe I can just go into this house and say, hey, I'll knock on the door. Hey, I want to come look at your house. Like, how do you
Mhm.
even know that they can afford it? Like, you don't want to let a stranger just into your house. That's where like I can help you out. I can help you out by pre-screening them, telling them if they're pre-approved, letting you know if they're pre-approved, whatever, and then you can, kind of set your mind at ease by letting these strangers into your house before you show them your house. Met a lot of very interesting people that way. And then eventually a lot of those clients became, or a lot of those sellers, they
Mhm.
either two things happened. Either they sold
Mhm.
and they would come back to me for their loan when they went to go buy, because most sellers turn into buyers just
Sure.
wherever, or they gave up for sale by owner. And I always ended every first appointment with these people, and I said, if for some reason like a few months down the road it comes up that like you haven't sold yet, I have a big network of realtors that I can introduce you to.
Right.
So they would either sell and I would get the buy side loan, or they would end up not selling and say, hey Nate, all right, I need a list with a realtor. Do you know one? And then I could then refer a deal out to a realtor and help expedite starting that relationship with that realtor. So it worked really well for me. I did that for about 8 or 9 months. I have no idea how many like yard signs I have floating around there, but I never went and picked any of them. I should have. So if anybody at NOLA Lending is listening to this, I'm sorry for all the money that I cost you all for all the yard signs, but I'm sure I more than made up for it on the loan revenue. So yeah, that's how I started, and I still do business with some of the realtors that I pass those deals off to this day. There's a guy that I've done, I think, 3 or 4 loans with that it all started with Craigslist. So I like to find different ways to differentiate myself and different possible solutions to problems like that exist.
So I love that story. And when I watched it, I think I hearted it on TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But can you imagine if our entire audience, right, all of our loan officers and mortgage brokers and real estate agents and everyone that's listening could pinpoint that one tactic that they used that was truly out of the norm, just out of the box or what have you, and did a 30-45 second TikTok about it. I would eat that. I would take all of those and put them in its own channel.
Yeah, they call it like creative financing or something.
Yeah, because we're all having to fight against the, like I said, the narratives out there and the obstacles and the challenges that exist in both industries. Plus, you're out there and, most of the time, 99% of the time, you're not part of this humongous, uber successful team, and you have to build it your own way, right? And it's a very independent independent business acumen that exists. And for those that have been successful over the years, have found their Craigslist, right? Have found their little niche and went after it. And some of them still do it today. And think about this, Nate. You did all of that and you weren't truly bogged down in a CRM somewhere, or you had to figure it out. And there's probably a little A/B testing involved. You just didn't know you were doing it.
Right.
But it was consistency, right? Even there, where you hit it up 7 emails every morning and followed up, you answered your phone. I mean, these are the guerrilla basics of not just marketing, just business sales development, right? Gosh, I love that story. Now, Nate, did you want to give any other tips to our folks, about TikTok or anything?
Well, I think, no matter what you do, whether it be creating content or you're trying to build any kind of real estate or mortgage business, like I'm a big believer in leaning into your strengths and knowing your strengths, but also like building your network around your strengths too. So I was able to do that on Craigslist because previous to that, I was making a ton of cold calls. I was cold calling refis. Previous to that, it's kind of a building block too. So like previous to me doing all these cold calls, I had success with cold calls because previous to that, I was working in a call center. So I was used to making 80 phone calls a day.
Oh, wow.
So like it's taking skills that you've acquired or just natural skills that you have and you keep doubling down on it and you keep improving on it. But another way that you take like an interest or a skill that you're good at. So like I played golf a lot growing up. And I started a golf league for real estate professionals here locally. And that helped grow my business and my local influence too, because it was in my comfort zone. It was something that came naturally to me at that point. People can feel when you're confident and when you're comfortable. So you can get to know people better and people can get to know you better when you're in that comfortable, that confident mindset there. So finding things that you're good at and really doubling down on it and even trying to network around those things. It could be basketball, like it could be tennis, it could be pickleball, like if you're good at pickleball, it could be music, whatever it is, taking that and doubling down on it and trying to build a network around it, around some interests. Like I've had a lot of success with that, but overall, no matter what you do, it all comes down to consistency.
Gotcha. Well, Nate, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on this call. I mean, we could probably do a whole season on discovering these things. There's a lot of nuggets that you've shared with our audience that, consistency and storytelling and authenticity and just, really pulling at the heartstrings of your audience to, get the message out, right?
That's right.
And get the products and programs sold. If you're a mortgage loan officer, get the deals, get the new listings if you're a real estate agent, and there's so much synergies between the two industries,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much to look forward to in 2024. So,
Mm-hmm.
Nate, and again to the audience, thank you for tuning into another episode of Krish Marketing Podcast. We'll include all of the links so you can follow the mortgage creator, the lender avenger, aka Nate Fain, in the descriptions below. And as always, we like to end our podcast with our famous, probably not unique tagline, which is "Stay curious and keep marketing." All right.